If you have ever wanted to design your own multi-tool with only components that you actually need, the Roxon Flex might be the solution. But there has not been any comprehensive guides on this tool thus far. So in this video, we are going to cover three different things. Number one, we're going to talk about who this tool is for and its best advantages. We're going to cover a buyer's guide that will give you a clear explanation of every implement that is available and who they are for. And then we will also have another section that's just on tips and tricks I've discovered over using this for the last few months. So with that, let's get started. So before you go out and invest in the Roxon Flex and all its components, let's talk about what it is and what it is definitely not. First and foremost, this is going to be a mid-range or mid-sized multi-tool. It's going to be very similar in weight and dimension to something like the Leatherman Arc or Free P4 and also the Leatherman Wave, although a little bit shorter. This is not going to be a replacement for tools that are easily carryable that have a one-handed locking blade, such as the Leatherman Curl, Wingman, Swiss Tool MX Clip, or anything similar to that. It's not going to perform the same action because as of the filming of this video, they have yet to release a one-handable blade. Now this is sort of related to the potential drawbacks of a modular tool, and that is that you have no spacers between the implements, meaning that they are going to clump together. They are working around this to try to find a solution, and they will probably be releasing a one-handable tool at some point, maybe after you've seen this video. But as it sits, it comes with a pocket clip. You absolutely can carry it in your pocket as your only cutting implement, but you're going to need two hands most of the time in order to deploy a blade. So the way that works is you actually use the locking switch in the opposite direction, and it will fan out all of the implements on the inside, which is really, really convenient. And this will actually let you, in many cases, access those small tools with one hand. So even though the long implements, which include the long blade, are not easily one-handable, it is very easy to access these smaller implements on this tool, which I find particularly useful. So even if I have it in reverse grip, I can still use this to fan out the tools, select the one I'm looking for, and then push it out, and then I have it. And then I can simply disengage the lock and close it again. Think of this a lot like the Swiss Tool or Swiss Tool Spirit without the one-handable blades. That will change, but for now, that's what it is. You're going to see this tool in a variety of different price points depending on the inserts that you pick. The cheapest being somewhere around the $60 mark, and then the most expensive being somewhere just around $100, depending on the tool set that you choose. If you pick all of the most expensive implements, you're going to get up to around the $100 price, but with it, you're going to get a lot of benefits, along with, of course, being able to pick exactly what those implements are. Before we kick off this buyer's guide, I want to say a big thank you to Roxon, who has agreed to give me a 10% discount for anyone using the link down below in the description. This, as far as I can tell, will be a permanent fixture, allowing anyone who uses it to get 10% off the Roxon Flex and all its components. So big thank you to them. And if that ever changes, I will update the description. But as of right now, you can do that and use it whenever you're seeing this video. Now, depending on when you are ordering this, they may already have available some form of pocket knife equivalent instead of just the plier-based frame. And that offers a lot of different ways to carry the tool. So I don't know what will be available when you see it, but you're gonna have to start with some kind of frame before you get started. The one that is currently available is this. It is a plier-based multi-tool. It is spring-loaded. It has replaceable wire cutters. It has a gripping section in the front here and a fine tooth section above that. This actually works very, very well. They've done a great job upgrading it from past generations, and it's the same plier head you will find in the Roxon Flash, which is the S802. This is actually held in place with the really cool double detent system. There's like a little ball traction that actually allows it to lock in and out. quite a bit better than having a spring on the back. And it also will have installed 5 spacers as well. In addition to the frame, you will get this little holder that will let you hold on to a sharp object basically while you put it in and out. I don't never do that, and we'll talk about it in the tip section, but you can do it. So I will show that when we go to replacements. It'll also come with a T8 wrench, and it'll come with a spare set of cutters. I'm really thankful that for $40, I get the tool to adjust it, and I get a spare set of cutters. How novel. Everyone should be doing this. Every major brand should include a spare set of cutters with their plier-based tool if it has this situation. And at $40, that's not a bad start. Let's go ahead and move on from the frame, and we'll talk about the long implements. One thing you're going to notice is that there are long and short implements for this tool. And if you look at the frame, and this will also be true when you do the selector on their website, you will find that there is only one long slot. Now, there is an exception to this rule. I have a little instruction guide on how to fit 4 long implements in this tool without actually losing anything. We'll talk about it in the tips and tricks section, but generally speaking, there's only 2 long slots. There are a total of 7 long implements available online as of the filming of this video, and more to come. The one that is missing is the long scalpel holder, which is a different type of blade. There is also a short version of the scalpel holder, and it is actually because of that I don't have it on the table. I find it to be just better in general than the longer version. That's the only reason. But if you prefer it, it is available. So for starters, we have the blades. Both of these are in German 4116 stainless. They are both sheep's foot in blade shape. And I gotta say, I like both. I've used both. I've done some woodworking with both and really, really enjoyed it. But I think my preference in general, because I carry it as a complementary tool, is the serrated blade. If you are carrying a separate folding knife, it's going to make more sense to have a different blade shape that does something different. And so I do recommend the serrated blade, probably a little bit more. However, if this is your only tool you're carrying, maybe in the pocket, on the pocket clip, then a straight blade is probably gonna make a little bit more sense. So that's the blades. They're all good, all 3 of them. It's really just gonna depend on what your preference is. And even if you're planning on using this tool bladeless, I do think it would be worth selecting one of them to have as maybe a spare, depending on the situation. So that leaves us with 4 other implements to choose from: the saw, 2 different files, and the scissor. Now you might think this is a no-brainer, but it's really not. One thing I will say for sure is there's one tool you probably shouldn't get as of right now, and that is this cross-cut and straight-cut file. It's not aggressive enough. Aggressive? Did I just say aggressive? Aggressive enough to really justify its place. Yes, it has a little cutting surface on the bottom, but it's not particularly deep or aggressive. So for that reason, you probably should skip on this file, leaving us with 3 different implements to fit in 1 slot. You can get the scissor, and I don't have a problem with that per se because it is actually quite good, but it's also one of the easiest things to replace, and they are currently working on a shorter version of the scissor that will allow it not to fit in one of those long slots. So if you really think about this as maybe like a maybe, it comes between the saw and the file. Now the file here is one of the coolest because it is actually 2 different grits. We have 600 grit on this side and 300 grit on another, so that you actually have the way to actually sharpen your straight blade. So if this is inside your frame, you can then sharpen your blade and you are back to having a sharp knife. And for something that is in a relatively soft steel, this actually can really come in handy. In addition, it's going to allow you to sharpen a lot of other tools to go along with it. I would say that regardless of your choices here, whether you're getting the scissor or the saw as the tool that's inside, you should most definitely end up with this as an additional implement. And what's nice is all of these come in a nice little case, and that case can fit up to 2 long implements or too short implements, and it is very convenient to keep in a bag. So you have a diamond file for sharpening that then can be used with this handle. Very, very useful. Which brings me to my conclusion. I think that the saw is the highest priority because you want, if you're going to have a saw, the longer the better. And scissors, more often than not, can be something else. You can use a blade for a lot of tasks that you would normally use a scissor for, even when it's not as convenient. And the only two things that a scissor is particularly good at, such as hygiene tasks and cutting thin threads, may not work too well with this scissor. And the reason is, unlike with the prototype, which had sharp pointy tips, this does not come to a pointy section, meaning it's not going to be ideal for precision cuts in the first place. So that limits its functionality slightly. If you want, you can always grind down the scissor and make it nice and pointy and sharp. It does have the right geometry and rigidity to be good at precision, but the current one is not my preference. So in order, I would say the saw is probably the best of these implements, along with the diamond file for certain instances, and then the scissor. I don't fault anyone for picking any of these or all of them, but yeah, know the limitations here. What the scissor can and cannot do, the fact that the diamond file does not have the third edge for removing, for cutting soft steel. And I also will tell you, I've tried the performance on this saw, and it's kind of comparable to Victorinox in performance, which is a really big compliment. So nice job there. All of these are good, can't go wrong. And as we'll show you in the tips and tricks section, you might be able to get more of these implements in your tool than you think. Now the Roxon Flex became available in June, basically, and there are already a ton of implements available. So we're going to break this down into sections when it comes to the small tools. And we'll begin with the cutting implements. We have a reamer awl, also done in German 4116. This is very nicely tapered, and when you use it, it actually kind of is more on the center line of the tool, which is great for pushing down. We have the small scalpel holder. This will use a number 13, but I believe we'll also use a number 11 scalpel. Very cool, and it comes with one as well. We have a small serrated blade. It's almost identical in shape to the reamer awl. It's just ground a little bit different. So that might be a really good choice if you wanted a different setup on the long implements. We have a chisel that also has a wire stripper, two of them in fact, a V cutter and also a wide opening wire stripper. That's pretty neat. And then we have a pole cutter. Now this is not really a flathead, but there are some slotted screws that might work with it if they're really, really, really big. But overall, it's just a pole cutter for strapping and that kind of thing. They really did a good job. And actually, the prototype I got for the pole cutter, which I didn't think was ground particularly well, it appears that they have fixed that problem. And now it is coming very sharp and also really nicely done. They've actually done a great job with that. So no qualms with any of these components. Depends very much on what you want. It also gives you a lot of options in the long tool slots. If you choose not to go with one of the two blades, or three blades I should say, in the long slots, you can instead have a small serrated blade or scalpel holder. And I tend to do this. I tend to use the scalpel holder because you can take this out of the frame. And if I have to make precision cuts, I don't have to hold the whole handle. I can just hold this and I can actually cut what is necessary and put this back in the tool. One of the benefits of having a modular tool in the first place. Now, one of the things I'm really liking about the Roxon Flex and the way Roxon has done it is they have long implements and short versions of those implements. So you can mix and match as you see fit in a much more fluid way. So if you are willing to give up on the rough diamond side and the length, this might also be a solution. This has a hook sharpener. This also has a wire bender, and it is also only on one side. So as long as you don't mind it just being the fine grit diamond, this actually could be a very good solution that will free up one of those long slots. I got no qualms with this, in fact. I think it's actually pretty solid to have an option in the small slot that doesn't, like, isn't as impactful. Of course, we have a standard can opener. Not much more to say here. If that's something that's important to you, you can get that as well. And then we have this thing. I'm actually impressed that this even fits in a small slot, and it does. It's not actually one of the long implements. But as I've stated in my last video where I talked about this thing, I would definitely not use this as a scaler given the choice. If you've ever scaled a fish before, it's very messy. The stuff the slime is super sticky, and if you've ever seen it caked on a knife that folds, you may as well throw the knife away. It's just awful. So I'm not sure I'm a big fan of this tool, but just like so many other things that they're doing, they give people the option. They're not forcing anyone to get them. So if it's something that's important to you and you want a hook puller and scaling tool for fishing, they have that as well. Now here's where things get really good. They have 2 different Phillips drivers and they have 3 different flathead drivers, and they combine themselves with a bunch of other functions. And I like what they have done here. So first of all, let's start with the Phillips driver. It's long, it's narrow, and it also works as an adapter to the bit kit that they have available for $5 on their website. So if you don't want to go full hex, you want something dedicated with a long, narrow head, you have this as an option. It takes up 2 of the 5 slots on one side. So there's that. And yeah, it might be worth it if you really need those other slots, because the bit driver itself takes up all but the long slots. So this is a total of 4 slots. There are only 5 inside the frame. And so you have to really be sure that you want this. Now, speaking of that, let me grab my tool that I've been using lately. The one thing that I think the biggest surprise for me is that this will not only take standard 1/4" bits, but if you have a long bit that you need to carry with you for whatever reason, this will work with that. In fact, I think this might be the only multi-tool I have ever found that actually works with these long bits and can store them. This is kind of such a big deal. You're going to need a lot of justification to go this over this, especially because this is only $5 or $6. And because it takes up 4 slots, it actually makes the tool quite a bit cheaper if you really think about it, because that means you only have 2 implements on that side, making it a whole lot more affordable. And at the same time, it's one of the best bit holders I've ever seen. So it has a really nice strong magnet. It is on the side, which I really appreciate, because that means if something is double-sided for whatever reason, it's not going to crack that magnet, which I think is a really good choice. It works with a bunch of different bits, as I'm showing here. And you also have a little section at the very top for grabbing it if you want to. So you don't necessarily need to use the mechanism in order to deploy it. You can do that, or you can just reach in and grab the tool as you see. Depending on the tension, it'll be easier or harder. You can adjust that with your little torque wrench. Now, I think we've established the bit holder is definitely the way to go, especially if you can use the long bits, because that's the only real downside of a bit holder in the first place. Sometimes you have recessed screws, and this basically fits in those slots where the actual bit holder itself might not be able to fit. Honestly, I think it's a no-brainer. This is the one to get, unless you're absolutely sure you have to fit in every cutting implement that they have available. Then I would go with the Phillips. Okay, but even then, you have 3 flatheads to go with. You have a spoke wrench over here. So this is different sizes for that, along with a small flathead. You have a standard, very conventional flathead and bottle opener. And then my personal favorite, this one, which has a crosscut file and a flathead and a depth gauge. It actually stops right here. So you can actually measure the depth of something by sticking it in. I love this thing. This is definitely my preferred version. If you're going to get 2, this is the one to get. And the best part is, if you pair it with either the diamond file or the small diamond file, you now have two different grits. You have the crosscut, which actually all of the ones I've tried actually are more aggressive than the longer one, which is very strange. For some reason, it's better. And yeah, it's not impacting the tool that much because of how thick it is. It's not super deep, and there's no additional cutout for things like, I don't know, bottle openers on this tool. So it's plenty good enough. I wouldn't exactly use it for prying, like heavily at least, but as a flathead, yeah, I got no qualms with this thing. And I definitely gotta say, if you're gonna pick two, these are the two that I would pick. They complement each other so well. It gives you a file when you actually need it. Maybe you don't want to even carry a file. You have flathead and Phillips combo, and then you have an extra long tool on top of it that has a lot of additional functions. That's my thoughts on the drivers. You can pick some of these others, but unless you are biking a lot, I'm not sure that this is going to make a ton of sense for everyone. But the fact that they have them available is very much appreciated. There aren't that many bad choices here. The last thing I'm going to say is that my Phillips at least worked pretty well, but looking at the others, they can vary on how sharp these edges can be. So once again, bit driver is definitely king here, and absolutely one of the biggest reasons to consider the Flex in the first place. Next, we're going to cover some specialized tools, and we'll kick it off with the ferrocerium rod. So this is going to give you the ability to start a fire, especially if you have the saw, which has a 90-degree spine. That'll allow you to strike this easily, or you can use the reamer awl, or the, this will probably definitely work using one of these wire strippers. It's to starting a fire, but I will tell you, this doesn't make much sense to me when you can instead have a little lanyard bead that's a ferrocerium rod, or you can have a much bigger one that's more effective. I would certainly not give up 3 slots for this thing. Not a chance. Now, if this is ever replaced with a ceramic hone, so I can then hone blades, oh yeah, I'm down for that. I'm down for that. Very much so. So that I would buy, but I don't think you should buy this. That's just my thought. Now, in addition, if they ever come up with a threaded section that allows you to screw in gun cleaning rods, that also would be well worth the money. So not something they have right now, but the ferrocerium rod is probably one I would skip. Now, we have specialized tools here. We have H7 or 7mm hex down to 2mm. You also have a 2.5mm. Now, there's a bit of a misunderstanding, though, when you go to buy this on their little tool builder. This says 2 layers, right? This says 1 layer. When you put them in the builder, it will make it so this looks like it's 3 layers in the tool builder. And so you might think, oh, I can't fit everything, but that's not how it actually works. If you look at this number 6 hex, you'll notice that there's a cutout there, and it actually only fits in a single layer, as long as you are pairing it with another short tool. Now, whether it's the 2mm, 2.53, or the T6 Torx, you can combine both of these and take up only 2 slots. So if you see some of your tools getting pushed down to the extras slot on the tool builder, don't fret. Remember, everything comes separately, so you will be able to get it to work. This is very, very important. So if you order them, think about which ones you'll use most. For me, especially, it would be the T8, T6, which perfectly fit together. I love that. And these are well worth the option to take up 2 slots, because this tool can adjust the tool itself. And then this one is really good for screwing things down on pocket clips, a lot of which are T6s, as are body screws. Can't go wrong. That's my personal preference. Just keeping in mind that this is technically 2 layers and this is like 0 layers, right? They fit inside each other. So together they are 2, not 3 layers. Only you know if you need these specialized tools, and if you are someone who uses them regularly, this is a fantastic option. Now, after seeing all that, it might feel very overwhelming and you don't know where to start. So I'm going to offer some baselines, some things to begin with, and then build off of it from there. We'll call this one the everyday carry setup. And it's always going to start with a bit driver. This is one of the best bit drivers I've seen on any multi-tool because it can use those longer bits and then also store them inside the frame. So you definitely want to start with that. That takes up 4 slots. It also means that the tool in general is going to be less expensive because this is only $6 and that's taking up 4 slots, whereas most tools are between $4 and $8, meaning that this side is on the cheaper of all the options you could have gone with. So once you have the bit driver, you have one long slot, and I think for most people, that's going to end up being the scissor. I think even though I've stated my case for going with one of the 2 other long implements, I think people will still choose this, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good scissor. But let me just propose, maybe, just maybe, that you go with a Victorinox jet setter on your keys, which has a very good precision tip and works very well, and then you pick one of the other 2 long implements. That's my preference. That's the way I suggest it, and just something to consider. But scissor, good choice, not going to be a problem. On the other side, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. There are 3 implements in here that I think you should absolutely choose if you're going for something daily. And then the other 2, well, that's really up to you. So the 3 implements that you definitely want are going to be one of the 2 blades, the flathead with the depth gauge and crosscut, along with the diamond file. So think about this. You have 2 different file surfaces here. You still have a diamond file you can pull out to sharpen your blade. And that gives you a lot of versatility, a ton of versatility, which leaves us with 2 slots. Now, I currently have it set up with a T6 and a T8, which you kind of need to pair together. But realistically, there are 3 other implements currently available that you might want to consider, depending on what you do and why you might want that multi-tool. The first one is a chisel with the wire stripper, depending on what kind of home improvement tasks you're looking for, the scalpel holder, and the pole cutter. I would say the pole cutter is the most specialized. If you're doing strapping a lot, obviously that's going to be a good choice for you. If you're doing electrical work, yeah, that's probably the thing. And also wood chisel, very, very, very useful. But the scalpel holder, now this is a very convenient tool. And the reason is when you pull it out of the frame, you can then kind of use it like a pen and actually carve things very, very carefully without the weight of the tool itself. Very useful. You can't go wrong with any of these choices, but how you build it is up to you. I would suggest, though, at the very beginning, starting with these 3 implements plus the bit driver and a long tool. As long as you begin there, you're actually in a very good shape and you probably have the best overall setup at the lowest possible price. Now, let's talk about this in a really excellent context, and that is in the outdoors, because this tool offers something I think very few tools actually can. When it comes to being an outdoor tool, it's possible the Roxon is in a league of its own. The ability to take out the diamond file and be able to sharpen things and put it back and have it secure that way. The ability to use different size scalpel holders for hunting. And most importantly, the ergonomics. So we didn't talk a lot about the ergonomics. I have in past videos, but the stamped handles that do increase the weight a little bit, but they also make it one of the most, if not the most comfortable grip I have ever experienced on a multi-tool. It is not even close. Like, it feels like night and day when it comes to using the blade on this thing. And you could see it's sort of tapered away from the handle. It just makes for such an enjoyable experience. If you're sitting here working on it, you have such a great grip. There's all of these rounded corners. Everything is flush. It's a dream. It really, really, really is. So it's definitely a good place for this tool. And it's also where you're likely to carry it with a holster, which makes a ton of sense. Okay, so I have one side that's pretty much set up with things I think you should absolutely consider, and then the other one is sort of up to you. The first half, you're definitely going to need the saw. The saw is a must, an absolute must item. And having a backup, even if you have another long saw, is really useful, and this thing is going to do a great job with notching and a bunch of other bushcraft related tasks. To go along with it, the reamer awl. These are essential components for any woodscraft outdoor task that you're going to need. This is for drilling holes in wood, this is for cutting in wood, and then of course the blade. Those three things are like quintessential. And there is a reason to have pliers. Pliers are useful for all different types of tasks. In addition, we have a lot of cool options, all of which I think are going to really help you. The first one is the chisel. That's going to also help with notching as well and doing different types of traps, etc. The small diamond file, which doesn't take up a long slot, and also the flathead. Now, this might not be immediately apparent, but having the file, first off, having the depth gauge, and having a small prying tool, these are very useful things. You definitely want to have all of those, and it's worth it. It's absolutely worth having this in your implement. And it also allows you to have potentially both the Phillips and flathead driver without giving up 4 slots for the bit holder. So for that reason, I definitely think that that would be the last one you should definitely consider. Now, on the other side, we have 4 additional slots. And really, it's up to you. All of these are good choices. If you think you might still need a tool for maintenance, I highly recommend starting out with the Phillips driver. This is a great place for it because it's less likely to get lost than one of the bits that's sticking out of the bit holder, and it takes up 4 slots. So now you have 2 additional slots that you can use for different things. And in those 3 slots, there's 3 that really make sense to me, and then maybe 1 more that you might want to consider in the right context. So a gut hook or pull cutter, it makes sense in the context of hunting to prevent yourself from accidentally cutting into something you shouldn't. The scalpel holder, kind of in the same vein, having a very precise replaceable blade that you can bring out is really useful, especially if there's any medical emergency where you might need something extra precise. A can opener, which also with the right modifications could be made into a spoon gouge, and then having a backup blade like this small serrated blade, which is still quite shallow and could be used also as a chip knife if you want to do some proper wood carving. I even think you could sharpen that a little differently and might be able to make it even better for that purpose. So with that, any of those are good choices. There's 2 additional slots. If I just put this in here, let's say I want it for a hunting context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that open, put that in there, and I'm going to take the scalpel holder as well. So that would be one example, like that. And then there you go. There's one of those setups. Don't forget, when you buy these tools, you can also put a couple of additional implements, 2 in fact, in those little holders that it comes with. So if you want to have this in a bag, like with the diamond file, and skip the small one, maybe that makes sense, assuming that you're not carrying a dedicated sharpening tool. It really depends on how much gear you're actually deciding to carry. The sky's the limit, and there's a lot more stuff coming out. Definitely skip on the ferrocerium rod. There's better options. And there's certainly so much premium on those slots, you don't want to really sacrifice it. That's my second setup for this tool that I really think makes a lot of sense. Now the last setup I'm going to show you is probably the one that excites me the most. There are very, very few tools out there that can genuinely be TSA legal. Now that does not mean that the TSA won't decide, oh, it looks like a multi-tool, I'm taking it, and they're not going to look at anything and you might get it taken anyway. I will tell you that I walked through TSA with the tool from Blade Show Atlanta, set up in a way, actually this way, and it had no issue. And they looked at it, they had no problem, they took everything out, and that was that. Not saying that's always the case, but having a bladeless tool that still offers a lot of value and can complement an actual blade is a huge advantage. So this is the setup that I took when I came from Atlanta. So we have a bit driver right here, obviously, and it takes up a ton of space. So pretty simple. We have the scissor, which is also TSA legal. There is even a separate section dedicated to scissors of various different lengths. And this is where having those rounded bits actually really help the case. The fact that it is not very pointy is really nice. On the other side, we have a scalpel holder, diamond file, a pair of Torx bits, and the flathead. Now you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, that's a blade. Yes, of course it's a blade. But the advantage here is that this is a number 11 or number 13 scalpel holder. And you could go to Michael's and a bunch of other places around the country that can get a replacement. So if you end up somewhere where this is in your your carry-on bag, you can find a place to get a blade. So now you have a way to actually cut things if necessary. And this can be simply removed, which, let's see, I'm not going to try to do it with a viewfinder here. It can simply be removed, and now your tool is perfectly fine, right? There you go. That's pretty much the no-brainer. Now, as of right now, there aren't a ton of implements that you could pick instead of one of these drivers. But as I've shown in other videos, there are special tools that they are working on right now that might be a decent consideration instead. So these are prototypes. I want to be clear, these are prototypes, but there are a bunch of other tools that could potentially fit in that slot. My favorite might be this little pen and tweezer combo. I'm actually looking forward to them coming out of that. There's a little comb, right? So there's a lot of options that are coming, which is one of the reasons I like this setup so much. And yeah, the ability to simply complement a folding knife versus trying to compete with it, yeah, I get behind that. Now, if you want the most out of your Roxon Flex, this is going to be that section. Let's start with the most important tip I can give you. If you watch nothing else from this video, I hope you take at least this to note. And that is how to unlock your tools. I know it sounds simple, but the problem I notice is that everyone I give this to without instruction does this. They go to unlock the tool and they push it all the way, thinking that that's what's required in order to disengage the lock. But if you notice, it disengages once you reach that first stopping point. You can really feel it in the tool, just like that. So you don't need to go all the way, because if you do, your tool can accidentally come out. Don't do that. Please just remember that one thing. Now, once you figure it out, once you understand how much force it takes, you will find that it's very easy. But if you think that you need to go all the way, the tool will feel a lot more fiddly than it otherwise is. And it's just simply not necessary. So please remember this important tip, if nothing else, when you get your Roxon Flex, so that you have the best possible experience. Now remember, this tool is designed for only 2 long implements, but I did kind of tease that you can get more than 2 long implements in this tool if you position them correctly. So, if you'll notice, there's enough of a gap on one of these sides where you can actually fit another long implement. Now specifically, the second long implement next to the saw, in this particular case, needs to be the straight blade. Now, I tried it with the serrated blade. It's not quite as good, but it definitely works well with the straight blade. Now there's other things we can do to make it work a little bit better, but as it is, it still functions normally and it still passes on that blade. If you want to, you can actually file down this little edge and it will actually make it even smoother, but it still works. Now I have 2 long implements, and the cool part is this, check this out. It deploys at the same angle as the small ones. So if you're very, very, very careful and don't hurt yourself, you can actually deploy this one-handed. Do so with caution, please. There will eventually be a one-handable blade. This is not a bad workaround, however. And actually, I really like that it's there. But my hands are kind of sweaty right now, and I'm pretty sure I would want to be very careful when doing that. Okay? So just know that. Now on this side, we have a saw and a blade. But on this side, we also have 2 long implements. It can be either the saw or the file, but it has to be on this same side. Now notice that the blade, the lower portion, is half the thickness of the scissor, right? And that is going to pass by that plier head perfectly. The only problem you're going to have here is that you are going to have this sticking out ever so slightly because of this metal tab, which does not affect anything because this is the top side you're actually pressing down. So if you were to remove some of this metal, you could actually have it be flush. But even without that, with no modifications whatsoever, we now have 4 long implements in here. So we have the diamond file, just to prove this, so I'm not like making this up. So we have the diamond file, careful, careful, careful. We have the diamond file, the scissor, the saw, and the blade. It can fit all of those. And it's another great reason to have access to that Phillips driver, because when you do this, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the bit driver. So there is one drawback to not being able to do that. But for some people, I think this will be the game-changing like thing that will make people want to consider it. So definitely consider the fact that you can do more with this tool than we're letting on, and it's just in its infancy. As they come out with new implements, things like the scissor that will be shorter will allow this to be far, far, far easier than it is even at this point. Now, the last thing I want to talk about specifically is tool adjustment. You get given a T8 Torx wrench. Now, you'll notice that when you look at the pivots, one of the two sides is security Torx and the other one is not security Torx. This is a captured pivot, so it does not move and it can allow you to use only a single tool to adjust the tension. So once you get the arrangement of tools you actually want, you can then adjust it so that deploying this is a little bit easier. Like right now it feels pretty tough. Okay, wait, actually I got to disengage the lock first. All right, so it's probably about right. It's probably okay. Now, if we go over here, how about this one? This one's a little loose. I can feel that it's a little loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just tighten this a little bit. There you go. And now it's definitely, I can feel it's already better. So don't forget to adjust your tool once you have it set up in the arrangement you want. And it's a pretty quick process to mix things around and change things. If you get the T8 install, the T8 bit, you don't even need this thing because you have the tool to adjust it, in the frame. That's pretty much it for my tips and tricks. I'm sure there will be more coming out. And if you have something specific you'd like to share that you found with your Roxon Flex, leave it down below and I will make sure to include it in our next video. So let me conclude by saying I hope other companies take note. When you offer the ability to customize your tool and make it as you see fit, people are far more likely to consider it. And I think this has generated a lot of hype for good reason. Now, currently there is no one-handable, like pocket knife option. But as you can see here, taking apart the tool right at the pivot makes it relatively simple if you want to make a pocket knife. Hopefully they will finish up by the time you're seeing this and you will have the option of the one with the bit driver on the opposite side, which is what they're working on. But yeah, I digress. If you think that there's something I missed in this video, something very important that's worth noting, let me know down in the comments. As always, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk again soon.